So I'm glad you guys could join me, and we're going to be doing these every month, the first Wednesday of the month at noon. We'll keep them quick. We're going to try to keep them under 30 minutes. That way you can just hop on real quick, see what's changed recently. But we started this webinar last month because I wanted to go over opportunities that I was seeing in the housing market. But in talking with my team, Sandy and Taylor, we were realizing that it's changing so fast. Like on a week by week basis, we're noticing the trends change, what we're able to help our clients accomplish, and the negotiating strategies that we're seeing realtors use. So then we thought we can do this every month and everyone can kind of come together and mastermind on what we're noticing as like real-time boots on the ground, as opposed to what the headlines are saying is happening in housing. So at the end, we'll have a Q&A. Jot down any questions you might have, or feel free to drop them in the chat as we go. And then at the end, we'll open it up for a few minutes to answer those. In the future, if you can't join us live for the webinar, don't stress. We'll always send the recording out in the afternoon or the next day. So I'm really optimistic about the market right now because I've seen buyers winning. And this is the closest thing to a buyer's market that I've seen in a long time, in at least the last 5 years. We define a buyer's market versus a seller's market as having 6 months or less of inventory available for sale in the MLS. So when there's more than 6 months inventory available, then we consider it a buyer's market. Now, we don't necessarily have that kind of inventory available right now, but to give you a point of reference, there were points in 2020 and 21 where we had like 7 days worth of inventory on the market at some times. So you could see how it would feel very different now when we have a couple months worth of inventory. And that's part of the reason we wanted to start these webinars. And like I said, the market moving so quickly. So to stay on top of it and to really succeed, you have to be constantly adjusting your strategy. So as you join us for these monthly ones, we'll hopefully help you do that. Full transparency and FYI, I'm a real estate investor myself, and I'm actively in the market this year. I'm telling you this because I want you to know that all the information I'm sharing with you is not just as a loan officer who wants to close deals. I am a loan officer who does want to close deals, but I'm also in the market just like you. So that should somewhat soothe your fears of a housing crash, because professionals wouldn't be trying to buy right now if that's what we foresaw. Foresaw? I don't know which is, if that's a word. Anyways, but my husband and I are on a mission to build a solid passive income stream using rental properties. So stay with me here because this is all going to make sense. Sandy on my team, she's also active in the market. And so she's going to share what she's noticing in her experience right now. And then you can see why we're watching the market so closely for multiple reasons. Now, I'm going to include this slide every single time. It was in the slide in the webinar last time, but I have to tell you this, and I have to always share it because I would never advise you to try to time the market. So let that be on record right now. I highly discourage it, actually. The right time to buy is when it is the right time for you personally and financially. So that's my disclaimer. If you try to catch a falling knife, you're usually just going to bleed. So on every single one of these webinars each month, I'm going to share economic news and a market update. I'm also going to share financing strategies that we're using with clients to help them take advantage of the market, what we're seeing realtors do in terms of negotiating, and basically why any of the economic shit that I went over before would matter to you and how it will impact your financing. And then we're going to share success stories every time, what we're seeing realtors and clients win at. Who doesn't like a good success story? Okay, so for a market update, the first thing to check out is obviously going to be interest rates and what the forecast is for this year. Hopefully you got my video on this. If you didn't, you can always shoot me a DM or an email and I can send you the full breakdown. But basically, I think there's pretty much 3 possible scenarios for this year. The first is that inflation remains high and we're doomed. Rates hit 8.5%, and me and my team cry every night. I feel pretty safe ruling that scenario out because inflation does seem to have already peaked and is heading down, at least from the last 2 reports. The second scenario would be that the consumer price index comes down, deflation continues, and mortgage rates stabilize at around 7%. You know, that soft landing that they've been talking about. The financial firm Morningstar thinks this is likely because in terms of inflation turning around faster than the Fed is implying. I think the Fed knows what's actually happening, but when they give their announcements and when they speak, they have to put a PR spin on it. And they also have to constantly react. They have to be reactive rather than proactive. But I do think that it's possible that inflation is going to come down much faster than the Fed is letting on. They think it's going to. Morgan Stanley actually predicts that the first Fed rate cut will be in December of this year. Now, the most realistic scenario from my point of view is the third one, and that's that the Fed continues to blaze rates up as they've publicly promised, and the economy falls pretty hard into a full-blown recession. Recessions, though, are good news for mortgage interest rates. So the more pain and suffering, unfortunately, there is throughout the economy, the lower interest rates will go. So it's good and bad news, right? Good news for you if you're trying to buy a house, bad news in terms of the impacts on the economy and the likelihood that this recession is actually felt by the average American. Because there's been plenty of recessions that no one even noticed. The second thing to pay attention to is housing inventory. So housing starts have been on a downward spiral for quite some time, and we know that's problematic because the demographics show the demand for housing is not going to get less. It's not going to cool. It's actually going to skyrocket as interest rates cool. We analyze the demand for housing by looking at household formations. We've been chugging along at about 1.7 million household formations per year for quite some time. It makes sense with where we are with millennials and how many there are in the population and how many of them are reaching that age of household formation. Household formation is when you have a family, right? Parents and kids, and the kids reach an age and an economic level of financial stability where they move out of the house. So for every adult moving out of the house, we call that a household formation. But when interest rates spiked this year, household formations dipped fast down to 1.3 million, basically because the kids couldn't afford to move out of their parents' basement. So the problem is when interest rates go back up and affordability comes back to where it was, or at least somewhere closer to where it was, we'll go back to the 1.7 million household formations per year. Builders have been building new homes only at 1.5 million per year. And we have to subtract from the 1.5 million about 100,000 worth of homes that are no longer livable, that didn't get renovated or whatsoever. They're just not a home that could actually house someone safely. It's not a form of shelter anymore. So you subtract 100,000 and then you're down to 100. Anyways, you're down to 1.4 million new housing starts each year. So you can see how between 1.7 household formations to 1.4 new houses being built, it's not enough. It'll cause a supply and demand problem. We could look at it from a different angle, especially since I'm not feeling very good at math at the moment, and we would find the same problem. Single family housing starts fell in November and are down 16% year over year. Permits fell 7% just from October to November. So the problem is going to go beyond supply and demand, but the supply and demand problem is big. It goes beyond supply and demand because it's going to be bad news for the economy overall if they're not homes for people to buy. Because yes, housing itself is a huge part of the GDP, but when you don't buy a house, you also see other sectors of the economy impacted. Because think about it, when someone buys a house, then they go out and they buy appliances and furniture and decorations for that house. So when that doesn't happen, then those stores that sell those goods are impacted. And when their bottom lines turn red, then they have to start laying people off. So we see how it all comes full circle from housing to filter out to other sectors of the economy. Let me look at your guys' faces for a second. Is this making sense? Is this helping? Flip me off if you're lost, if you're bored. If it's helping, then smile. That's a lot of smiles. Thank you. I appreciate the smiles. Okay. So why do you care about the data and why is it going to be important to share every time we do one of these classes? Well, as I mentioned, when interest rates come back down and Johnny can afford to move out of his parents' basement, there's more buyers in the market, but there's no more houses for them to buy. Another interesting thing about the market is that there are a lot of sellers with mortgages in the 3s or maybe even 2s, and they aren't wanting to sell because they don't want to walk away from that mortgage payment. So that's not going to help with the inventory issue either. So the opportunity that we have right now could be short-lived. if we hit that full-blown recession and interest rates come down quicker, then this window where you have opportunity to negotiate with sellers closes faster. Sellers have the upper hand when there's not a lot of supply and there's more demand. That's why it's good that you're on this webinar and you're paying attention, or you're on the Instagram Live and you're paying attention. Because typically in times like this, it's only the extremely wealthy who will benefit, because everybody else is watching the news and reading the headlines and not coming near housing with a 10-foot pole. They've just tabled their plans to buy and they're going to wait it out. Neil said something like it's FOMO. It used to be fear of missing out. Now it's fear of making a mistake, FOMM. So people are just pausing. They're just going to wait. But who's not pausing is JP Morgan Chase, who just announced a $1 billion fund that they've designated to buy real estate. Blackstone also raised a huge fund. We've talked about that. Big institutions and investors are ready to snatch up real estate, while the general public is being scared away. This is how the rich get richer. But it doesn't have to be like this. We can take advantage. And I want to sincerely impress upon you that you can use all the information, you can properly educate yourself, you can keep going to classes like this, you can sit down with a lender, you can strategize with your realtor, and you can put together your own personalized strategy for when you should buy and how you should tackle this market. And that's what we're doing. Like personally, that's what we're doing, is trying to tailor our strategy so that we can take advantage of this market. Because there's some pockets where we're already seeing that the window's closing in terms of opportunity. And I want Sandy to pipe up right now because she saw this firsthand just now.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, so I just got into contract on an investment property this Monday. So I'm really excited about that, and just wanted to share my very recent experience with you. So really, it is the right time to buy when it's the right time for you. So I sold another property. I'm using a 1031 exchange to purchase another property, deferring the taxes on that sale. So it's a benefit for me in that way, as well as this market is just something to capitalize on. So it's really interesting. What I've noticed is, so I actually ended up writing offers on 4 different properties until I got one accepted. And I'm noticing something really strange. So there are certain pockets that are being snatched up really quickly. The first house I wrote an offer on, for example, had 12 other offers on it. The person who won was also another investor doing a 1031 exchange. So it's really interesting seeing, I've had competition on all the offers that I've written, but then there are these homes that are sitting on the market for months and months, 6+ months in some cases. So, and a lot of them are really good houses. Some of them, yes, have some deferred maintenance or are a little bit outdated, but a lot of them are really cute. I looked at one in a really adorable neighborhood that had been on the market for over 200 days. I saw it, it was beautiful. It was in a great neighborhood, but had just been sitting. It was quite the gem. So I figured out though, my realtor did some sleuthing and figured out that it's actually been on the market for so long because the buyers that were in contract to buy it kept asking for extensions. And after a while, they were like, no, we'll just find someone else. So really, there was nothing wrong with the home. I think there's this tendency to be like, oh, this house has been sitting for so long, there must be something wrong with it. But really, it may just be a gem. So I really feel like there is a lot of opportunity to buy. Moral of the story is the housing market is not crashing. There's a lot of competition. But 2, it's a really great time to buy because you can still negotiate with sellers. So I ended up being able to get the seller to pay for my interest rate buy down, which is awesome. It's quite the difference now compared to a year ago when buyers were having to give up their left kidney and their firstborn son to get into a house and waive all their inspections. Now there's still competition, our market is still holding strong, but you're able to negotiate and still get a really great deal. So my thought on this is it never hurts to ask for a good deal. The worst that can happen is the seller can just say no, and you just keep looking until you find the right one.
I think that's perfect, because what I've realized about this market is that it's not that you're going to get a house for 200,000 below asking. It's that a good deal can be made in the terms, right? And so we're going to show you how to structure some of those terms so that you really take advantage of getting that good deal. And also congrats to Sandy for getting her offer accepted on something.
Thank you. I'm so excited.
I was supposed to have this slide on the screen while you spoke. Moving on. Okay, so current strategies that we're seeing right now, the 2-1 buy down is proving to be in 9 out of 10 scenarios better than a permanent buy down. So if you're not familiar, the 2-1 buy down is where the seller buys down your interest rate 2 points for the first year, and then the second year your rate is a point lower than the market, and then for the remaining 28 years you have the market interest rate. There's also a 3-2-1 buy down. We're finding that that's a bit too much of a credit you need to ask the seller for. They're not willing to chip in that much, but the 2-1 buy down typically amounts to like a 2.5% credit from the seller on this off the sales price, and we can accomplish that. Versus when you do a permanent buy down, where either you or the seller buys the interest rate down for the full 30 years. The problem with this strategy, I want to jump ahead real quick, is we think there's going to be a refinance opportunity in the near future. So I want to show you, like, on a monthly basis, the permanent buy down versus the seller buy down. The seller buy down wins, right? Because to buy down an interest rate for 30 years is expensive. So you're not going to get to buy down as much as if you're only buying it down for a year or two. So on this scenario, doing the 2-1 buy down got the interest rate down for the first year to 4.125%, which gets them a monthly payment that's over, well, it's almost $600 less. So here's how it happens when a client texts me and says, I found the property, this is the one. I call their realtor and I ask them to get in touch with the listing agent if they haven't already and find out what's most important to their client, the seller. They get back to me and say the seller needs a quick close, or the seller needs to actually stay in the property long term. So maybe we should offer them a free rent back. Or here's how much of a discount I think we can get on this property. And then I use that discount amount to figure out whether we do price reduction, permanent buy down, seller buy down. What can we do? Credit towards closing costs. That's my job. Figure out the best way to use the discount once the realtor lets me know how much money I have to work with. Now, I said that 9 times out of 10, the 2-1 buy down is better than the permanent buy down. And that's because if you refinance in the near future, you get to take the money that you took from the buy down that you didn't use. So say you have the 2-1 buy down, meaning you have a below market interest rate for 2 years before the remaining 28 years at market. Well, if you refinance 6 months in, the money that the seller set aside in a credit to buy down your rate is held in an escrow type account that you can use to pay down the principal balance of your loan. That's amazing because you didn't waste any of the credit from the seller. Versus if you spent your own money or used a seller credit to buy down your rate for 30 years, but you only keep that loan 6 months, 2 years, whatever it is, the rest of the money is wasted on the term that you didn't use. So I like to look at things as how they'll play out on a monthly basis. And then as you can see here, over the next 60 months, the 2-1 buy down is better for the client by like $30,000 in interest saved, and also taking into account what they spent at closing. So that was the first thing we're noticing, is that so far it seems most of the time the 2-1 buy down is better than a permanent buy down. Also, it's easy for the consumer as a buyer, if you're on this call, just who doesn't work in real estate, to just want to discount the property or discount the interest rate. Like, we just want to think in simple terms. But our team has to work really hard to make sure that we utilize the money in the best way. And oftentimes it's a combination of both, somewhat of a price reduction and somewhat of a credit. So we're doing this on a case by case. Every buyer scenario is different because we have to find out what their goals are. So keep in mind, you can use the seller credit for not just a buy down, you can also use it to minimize your cash to close. That's huge for a lot of you on the call who don't have a huge amount of money saved up, either for an investment property or a second home or a primary residence purchase. To have to only come to the table with your down payment and not cover closing costs could be what gets you into the market this year instead of next year. And it's a real discount you actually feel when you use the seller credit towards your closing costs. Because think of it like this, $5,000 off the price, or $5,000 off the price is not going to have a huge impact on your cash to close or your monthly payment. It's not going to be big. It's not even going to be like a couple $100. It's going to be like $50. But $5,000 do less out of your pocket at closing, you would definitely notice that, right? Like you would feel that. So when we talk with each client, we're asking what their goals are, what's most important to them. And we find out once we know your strategy and what your long-term plans are, then we can figure out the best way to combo the discount that we think is possible on that home. Also, be on the lookout, as Sandy's kind of touched on, for aged listings, because there are institutional investors who picked up properties over the last few years and are in a bit over their head, like Opendoor, for example. They have listings here in our area and all over the country that they brought on too high and have been just sitting. Maybe the property needs a little bit of work, or maybe it was just grossly overpriced. But you can look for these because you have a huge opportunity to negotiate there. It's with an institutional investor rather than a seller who has heartstrings attached to the house. And if it's been on the market longer than 30 days, regardless of if it's an institutional investor or just a normal person like you or I, you have the ability to negotiate and you should be able to get a deal on something that's been sitting that long. So definitely be looking for aged listings. Now, before we head into a quick Q&A, like I said, I want to try to keep these under 30 minutes. I want Taylor to share a success story she had with a client.
Hi, guys. So I have a client where we actually used a combination of the seller credit and a price reduction. So rather than reducing the price significantly, we reduced it some and then got the seller credit. Well, we're into the process. This lowered the payment as well as her cash to close, and we get the appraisal back and it came in low. So if this scenario happened last year, the client would have just had to basically come up or back out of the house. In this instance, she was able to get the home negotiated down in price and keep the seller credit. So where we may not be seeing affordability as easy right now, it's been super helpful in negotiating purposes. So not only could we make her payment less and get her to qualify for this house that she didn't even think she could qualify for, when the appraisal came in low, they came in even lower and kept the credit. So it's just amazing what we're seeing now compared to the last couple of years with blood samples and everything else you had to give to the seller. For
sure. I think that's amazing, because when that would happen last year, when the appraisal came in low, we felt so bad for our clients because it was like, you come up or walk away from your earnest money deposit. Those are your only choices. Mm-hmm. So let me open it up to you guys and see what questions you have, or if you have a success story, because there are some professionals on the call. So let us know if you've seen something really cool happen with a client recently, or if you have a question that you want us to answer.
Shivani, I have some input.
Okay.
We're seeing a lot of investors, and we keep saying the investor word. And I want to preface that investor is like you and me. It's not necessarily just the Blackstone people, the big guys out there. It's people just like us that are out there that are the investor that is buying right now.
For sure. Just like Sandy, and like she's the investor in that scenario.
Yep.
Let me check the chat and see if anyone posted any questions there. Anyone else seeing anything strange or having any questions? Don't be scared. Okay, here's the last thing, because some of you might be scared. You can all wave at each other now. But if you don't want to ask your questions now and you want to book just a one-on-one call with someone on our team, you can just scan that QR code. It'll take you to our calendar and you can book a strategy session with one of us, and we'll go over your specifics. We'll help you figure out what makes the most sense for you right now, because it is true what I said at the beginning. And what we want you to take away is that this market's full of opportunities, but also the right time to buy is when it's the right time for you specifically. So use that code if you want to schedule a time to chat. We're always happy to strategize. Even if we've already done it with you 5 times, don't be embarrassed, scan it, we'll do it. And if you're a realtor on this call who wants to talk about any specific clients or you want us to help you run numbers like we do, that analysis, that total cost analysis to show your client the best way to take advantage of the money, we're happy to do that too. Use the link. Thanks, you guys. I'm so happy you all joined us. Anyone who missed it, let them know. We'll be sending the recording out.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.